Alina's heart hammered against her ribs as she slipped through maintenance corridors, her mind racing faster than her feet. Cargo Bay 7. Third shift. 30 years of Dominion rule. And now humanity's remaining time as a free species could be measured in days. The Undine Glory's night cycle cast the passageways in dim blue light, a concession to the human crew's biological needs that the Jean Terry considered an annoyance, but tolerated for efficiency. Alina used the shadows to her advantage, pausing at junctions, listening for the distinctive crystalline hum that preceded Dominion officers. She reached her quarters, a sparse cubicle barely large enough for a cot and storage locker, and locked the door behind her. From beneath her thin mattress, she retrieved a small device that had cost 3 months of carefully hoarded rations on the black market. A signal jammer disguised as a maintenance scanner. It would buy her perhaps 5 minutes of privacy from the ship's omnipresent surveillance. Alina activated it and immediately opened her personal console, fingers flying across the interface. She needed information, specifically the security rotation for Cargo Bay 7. On a ship with over 5,000 crew members, schedules were complex and constantly updated. Her limited access as the Admiral's aide gave her just enough clearance to view staff deployments, but not alter them. There, a gap in the patrol schedule. Maintenance crews finished at 2:17. Security sweep began at 2:30. 13 minutes when Cargo Bay 7 would be empty. She deactivated the jammer before its extended use could trigger security protocols. Now she needed a believable reason to be in the lower decks during third shift. Alina pulled up her own schedule. Admiral Vexorn had requested her presence at 6 o'clock for his morning briefing. She would need to look rested, alert, and completely loyal. The image of Earth's moon, transformed into a massive mind control device, flashed through her thoughts. Alina had witnessed Dominion recalibration on smaller scales. Once, on an agricultural colony, locals protested water rationing. The Jean Terry didn't waste time with negotiations. They simply activated localized telepathic amplifiers. By evening, the colonists were thanking Dominion officials for reducing their water allocation further. Not Earth, Alina whispered to herself. Not while I still breathe. She removed her uniform jacket and studied her reflection in the small mirror above her sink. The woman looking back seemed older than her 38 years, lines etched around her eyes from squinting at schematics and security protocols. The scar across her left cheek had faded to a thin white line, a reminder of the day Commander Alina Reyes of Earth Defense Command became simply the human attendant. That day, as medical drones knitted her flesh together, Admiral Vexorn had stood over her, his crystalline form refracting light across her hospital bed. Your species possesses remarkable adaptability, he had said, almost admiringly. It is why we chose limited integration rather than full biological processing. You will serve as the connection between our glory and your kind's limitations. Alina checked the chrono. 23:42. 2 hours before her meeting with the mysterious Jean Terry officer. Enough time to prepare a contingency plan if this was a trap. She reached beneath her bunk again and removed a thin metal rod disguised as part of the frame. Pressed against the right nerve cluster, it could temporarily disrupt a Jean Terry's crystalline lattice, long enough to escape, though not to fight. They need a strategist, and we need an army. Krenzol's facets flickered with what Alina had come to recognize as anxiety, rapid pulses of green-blue light cascading through his crystalline structure. You don't understand the risk. If you're discovered. I understand perfectly, Alina interrupted, her voice low but intense. I watched Santiago City burn from orbit. 2 million people vaporized in 20 seconds. Her fingers unconsciously traced the scar on her cheek. If we do nothing, what happens to Earth will be worse than death. Cargo Bay 7 smelled of industrial lubricants and recycled air. They stood between towering stacks of supply crates, their conversation hidden by the constant hum of environmental systems. Alina had timed their meeting during the regular atmospheric cycling. the only period when the base sensors were temporarily offline to prevent false readings. "I've been collecting these," Alina said, retrieving a data crystal from inside her uniform collar. "Patrol schedules, fleet deployments, command codes, anything I can access as Vexorn's aide." Krenzol's appendage extended cautiously, enveloping the crystal. His structure briefly glowed as he absorbed the information directly. "Impressive, but insufficient," he vibrated softly. "What we need is organization, coordination across systems. That's where this comes in." Elena revealed a small metallic disc, no larger than her thumbnail. Modified from Dominion communication technology. Dr. Chen calls it a quantum echo transmitter. It can piggyback messages on your species' telepathic network without detection. "Impossible." Krenzol's facets darkened in disbelief. "Our network is closed, secured by frequency harmonics that shift according to patterns based on your ancestral mathematical systems," Elena finished. "Predictable if you know where to look." She allowed herself a thin smile. "Humans have been studying your technology for 30 years, Krenzol. Did you think we were just passively accepting our fate?" For a moment, the Jantary's form became completely still, a rare sight among his constantly shifting species. Then, almost imperceptibly, his central core brightened. "Perhaps we've underestimated your kind." "Everyone does," Elena replied grimly. "It's our greatest advantage." She outlined her plan rapidly. The quantum echo transmitter would allow them to coordinate with resistance cells on other worlds without detection. Elena would provide strategic guidance, attack patterns, security vulnerabilities, priority targets, while Krenzol would translate her human military thinking into protocols that diverse species could implement. "We'll need more allies aboard this ship," Elena said. "I have 3 names already, humans who've shown subtle signs of defiance without being obvious enough for detection. And I know others like myself," Krenzol added. "Broken facets serving on 5 other vessels in this fleet alone." The deck vibrated slightly beneath them, a shift in the ship's massive engines as it adjusted course. Their time was running short. "One question," Krenzol asked as Elena prepared to leave. "Why trust me so quickly? How do you know this isn't an elaborate trap?" Elena's eyes hardened. "I don't. But Operation Eternal Compliance launches in less than a month. If you're lying, I lose nothing. I'm already dead. If you're telling the truth," she straightened her uniform with practiced precision, "then we've just planted the first seeds of the Dominion's destruction." Admiral Vexorn's facets pulsed with that disturbing amber glow as he studied her. "You continue to surprise me, human," he said, one crystalline finger tracing the air near her cheek. "Perhaps your species possesses qualities we have underestimated." Elena maintained perfect stillness, fighting her instinct to recoil from his proximity. Vexorn's telepathic abilities were strongest at close range, and though humans had natural resistance, strong emotions could leak through. "I simply follow efficient protocols, Admiral," she replied, keeping her voice neutral. The relay restoration was a matter of identifying pattern disruptions. The Admiral's crystalline body shifted, refracting light across the command deck. Other Zontari officers kept a respectful distance. Vexorn's mood was notoriously volatile after security breaches. "You will join me for the diplomatic summit on Proxima Centauri IV," he announced, his resonant voice leaving no room for discussion. "My delegation requires a different perspective." Elena bowed slightly, the perfect image of a compliant servant. "As you wish, Admiral." Only when she reached the relative privacy of the maintenance corridor did she allow herself a thin smile. Proxima Centauri IV, where the prototype for Operation Eternal Compliance was being developed. The very location Dr. Chen needed to access. 2 hours later, Elena's inner circle gathered in the Environmental Control Hub, one of the few locations where surveillance was minimal due to the sensitive equipment. Dr. Marcus Chen hunched over a modified scanner, his gray-streaked hair falling across his forehead as he examined the resonance disruptor they'd used on the relay station. The oscillation frequency needs adjustment, he muttered, making minute modifications with tools designed for his arthritic human fingers rather than crystalline appendages. The Janteri adapted faster than expected. Lieutenant Sophia Duran nodded, her dark eyes constantly monitoring the hub's entrance. They're learning. Each success makes the next harder. Which is why we need to accelerate our timeline, Alina said, securing the hub's door. I've been assigned to Vexorn's diplomatic delegation to Proxima Centauri IV. We leave in 3 days. The room fell silent. Chen and Durand exchanged glances. That's where they're building it, Chen whispered. The prototype. Elena nodded. And where we'll have our one chance to redirect it. Sophia, I need everything you have on their navigation systems, particularly emergency protocols. Marcus, I need a larger version of your disruptor, something that can affect an entire facility. Durand frowned. Getting equipment past their security scanners will be nearly impossible. Not if it's disguised as authorized equipment. Elena produced a small data crystal. These are the manifest codes for Vexorn's personal items. The Admiral never travels without his meditation chamber, a perfect housing for our device. And how exactly do you plan to access his personal quarters to install it? Chen asked, eyebrows raised. Velena's expression hardened. By becoming indispensable. She hesitated, then continued. Vexorn has been taking an increased interest in understanding human psychology. He asks questions about our emotional responses, our decision-making processes. He's studying us, Durand said flatly. Like specimens. Yes, Alina agreed, but his curiosity gives me access. Access we desperately need. The implications hung heavy in the air. Getting closer to Vexorn meant placing herself at even greater risk of telepathic scanning, of discovery, of worse. We have one advantage, Alina continued, pushing away her apprehension. The Admiral believes humans are simple, predictable creatures. He expects subservience masking resentment. He doesn't expect strategy. And he certainly doesn't expect ghost protocol. The escape pod launches as Elena watches in horror through the viewport as Krenzol is completely encased in suppression crystal. His final telepathic message sears into her mind. They won't kill me immediately. I am too valuable for interrogation. But you must hurry. I cannot shield my knowledge forever. The pod's engines flared as it broke away from Proxima Centauri IV's gravitational pull. Elena's hands flew across the controls, initiating the stealth protocols Dr. Chen had installed. The vessel's energy signature dampened, becoming almost invisible against the background radiation of space. Blood dripped from a gash above her eye, spattering onto the datapad containing Krenzol's encoded coordinates. Elena's training took over, compartmentalizing her emotions. The mission had been both a success and a catastrophic failure. They had transformed the amplifier prototype into the Achilles array, but at terrible cost. 2 dead, Krenzol captured, and her own cover likely blown. The console beeped, signaling an incoming transmission on an encrypted frequency. Elena hesitated, then accepted the connection. Status report, came Dr. Chen's voice, distorted by layers of encryption. Prototype successfully reconfigured. Elena replied mechanically. 2 casualties. Krenzol taken. A pause, heavy with unspoken grief. And the Achilles array. Functional. It worked exactly as you predicted. The guards dropped into complete disarray the moment we activated it. Elena's voice caught slightly. But the effect radius is limited, only about 200 meters. We need something larger for Earth. That's why you need the crystal nexus, Chen said solemnly. The coordinates Krenzol sent, I've analyzed them. They point to a system beyond the Dominion's official borders, hidden in a nebula that scrambles their standard navigation systems. Elena's tactical mind immediately grasped the implications. That's why they've kept it secret. It's a vulnerability. More than that, Chen continued. According to the data fragments we've decrypted, the Nexus isn't just their religious center. It's the source of their telepathic amplification. The entire Dominion network routes through it. Elena watched through the viewport as the stars blurred. The pod had entered sublight speed, heading toward the rendezvous point, where Lieutenant Durand would be waiting with their modified shuttle. How long until they realize I'm involved? Elena asked. Hours, perhaps less, Chen admitted. The moment they revive Krenzol for interrogation, they'll know. You can't return to the undying glory. The reality of her situation crashed down upon her. 3 years of deep cover, over. Her careful positioning within the Admiral's inner circle, gone. The Resistance had gained a powerful weapon in the Achilles array, but lost their most valuable intelligence source. Elena's fingers tightened around Krenzol's datapad. We need to accelerate the timeline. Contact all Resistance cells. Tell them to begin Phase 2 immediately. That's weeks ahead of schedule, Chen protested. Many of them aren't prepared. They'll have to be, Elena said, her voice hardening with resolve. Because once Vexorn realizes what we've done, he won't wait. Operation Eternal Compliance will launch immediately. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. And I'm going to the Crystal Nexus. That's suicide, Chen whispered. Maybe, Elena acknowledged. But Krenzol sacrificed himself to give us this chance. I won't waste it. Her eyes fixed on the distant stars. The Dominion has controlled the galaxy for centuries. We have one opportunity to break their hold forever. Operation Eternal Compliance will commence in 72 hours. The Grand Sovereign himself will oversee Earth's conversion. As Elena's blood turned to ice, Vexorn added, You will accompany me to the ceremony, Commander Reyes. Your exemplary service has earned you the privilege of witnessing your species' ascension. Elena maintained her composure as she was dismissed from the bridge, her footsteps measured and unhurried, until she rounded the corner into an empty corridor. Only then did she allow herself to lean against the cold metal wall, her breaths coming in short, controlled gasps. 72 hours. Not the month they had planned for. Her datapad vibrated with an encrypted message from Lieutenant Durand. Arrays deployed to designated sectors. 7 sites ready. Awaiting your command. At least that part of the plan remained intact. The miniaturized Achilles arrays, distributed to Resistance cells across Dominion space, were now in position. They would provide brief windows, 15 minutes at most, when Jantari forces would lose telepathic coordination. But without the Crystal Nexus, these would be temporary disruptions at best. Elena hurried to her quarters, avoiding the central atrium where the crystalline stasis fields displayed their grim mornings. 3 of her own recruits hung suspended there, their faces frozen in expressions of agony. She had known 2 of them personally, Jensen from engineering and Miyazaki from medical. Both had families on Earth. Inside her quarters, she initiated her signal jammer and opened a secure channel to Dr. Chen, now hiding aboard a modified cargo vessel in the Callisto Shadow Zone. Vexorns accelerated the timeline, she reported, voice barely above a whisper. 72 hours until Earth's conversion begins. Chen's holographic projection flickered with static. That's impossible. The preliminary tests on Proxima Centauri IV showed the technology wasn't stable beyond 26 hours. They're desperate, Elena replied. And desperate empires make mistakes. That's our opportunity. She quickly outlined her plan. Activate all 7 arrays simultaneously in 48 hours. During the disruption, Resistance ships should target these coordinates. She transmitted a series of numbers. Chen's eyes widened. That's the Grand Sovereign's travel route. Exactly. If we can't stop the technology, we target its architect. Elena's voice hardened. Meanwhile, I'll accompany Vexorn to Earth as planned. It's a trap, Elena, Chen warned. He suspects you. Going with him is suicide. Maybe, she acknowledged. But it puts me exactly where I need to be. The Grand Sovereign will be there, the entire Dominion leadership in one location. Understanding dawned on Chen's face. You're planning to deploy the prototype array we recovered. Elena nodded grimly. Modified to maximum radius, It won't stop their plans permanently, but it might create enough confusion for our forces to strike effectively. And you? Chen asked quietly. Elena didn't answer directly. Make sure the resistance is ready. When the arrays activate, they'll have 15 minutes to accomplish their objectives. As Chen's projection faded, Elena removed the small resonance disruptor hidden in her uniform collar. Her last line of defense, if Vexorn attempted a deep telepathic scan, it would buy her seconds at most, but perhaps enough to activate the modified array. She caught her reflection in the viewport. The same determined eyes that had watched Earth fall 30 years ago now watched the stars with equal resolve. In 72 hours, humanity would either lose its collective soul or strike the first meaningful blow against the Dominion in generations. Either way, Elena Rice would be at the center of the storm. A plan crystallizes in Elena's mind. She won't destroy the Nexus. She'll reset it, using the Janteri's most sacred power against the Dominion itself. Elena studied the ancient inscriptions more carefully, tracing her fingers along symbols that seemed to pulse with faint luminescence at her touch. Unlike modern Zanteri script with its rigid geometrical patterns, these flowed like water, reminiscent almost of Earth's Sanskrit or Arabic in their elegant complexity. You understand our first words. The elderly crystalline priest had returned, his facets dimmed with age to a soft azure rather than the harsh blue of military caste Shantari. No, Elena admitted, but they're beautiful. The priest's form shifted slightly. An expression she'd learned indicated something like pleasure. They speak of harmony, of connection between all sentient forms. The resonance was meant to bring understanding, not dominance. Elena chose her next words carefully, yet the Dominion uses it differently now. The Grand Sovereign's interpretation has evolved from the Founder's intent, the priest acknowledged, vibrating at a frequency that wouldn't carry to the guards stationed nearby. Not all of us celebrate this evolution. So there were dissenters even here, at the heart of Janteri power. Elena filed this information away as the priest guided her deeper into the Nexus, explaining the historical significance of various chambers as though she were a genuine diplomatic guest rather than a prisoner awaiting execution. They passed through a vast circular hall where hundreds of Janteri stood in meditative formation, their bodies oriented toward the central spiral that rose through multiple levels of the structure. The combined hum of their telepathic communion created a sound like distant singing. The perpetual chorus, the priest explained. They maintain the harmonic frequencies that extend the Nexus's influence throughout Dominion space. Elena's tactical mind immediately understood. A critical vulnerability. If the chorus were disrupted, the entire telepathic network might collapse temporarily. The tour continued until they reached a chamber labeled in both ancient and modern script. Purification. Inside, suspended in a regeneration field, hung Krenzol. His fractured core glowed with uneven light, surrounded by healing crystals that slowly rotated around him. A most unfortunate case, the priest said, his tone revealing nothing about whether he knew Elena's connection to the prisoner. A structural defect that allowed individual thought to override collective harmony. The Grand Sovereign himself will oversee the reintegration once he arrives. Elena forced herself to appear merely curious rather than concerned. Is such reintegration common? Increasingly so, the priest admitted. The pressures of maintaining the Dominion's expansion create stresses in our society's structure. When the guards momentarily stepped away to admit a technician, the priest leaned imperceptibly closer to Elena. The ancient communion alcove contains historical records that might interest you. I will ensure you have access before your scheduled meeting with the Grand Sovereign. The implication was clear. The priest was offering her an opportunity, though for what purpose she couldn't yet determine. Later, alone in her assigned quarters, Elena reviewed what she'd learned. The Crystal Nexus was both more vulnerable and more important than even Krenzol had suggested. It wasn't merely a religious site or power source. It was the central node of the entire Dominion's control system. and sometime in the next 12 hours, she would have access to its historic controls. As Vexorn's ship breaks away from the Nexus, Alina watches through a viewport as the Resistance fleet gains the upper hand. Dominion ships either surrendering or fighting with diminished coordination. Despite her grievous wounds and uncertain fate as Vexorn's prisoner, she allows herself a moment of grim satisfaction. Humanity will not become slaves today. Blood trickled from the wound in Alina's side, staining her torn uniform. The Admiral's crystalline blade had missed her heart by millimeters, thanks to Krenzol's sacrifice. Pain radiated through her body with each labored breath, but she forced herself to remain conscious, tracking the vessel's trajectory through the small viewport in her containment cell. Vexorn had abandoned his flagship in chaos, commandeering this smaller, faster craft with his most loyal officers. Alina could sense their panic through the ship's vibrations. The crisp, coordinated movements of Dominion forces had deteriorated into frantic individual actions. The recalibration was working. A series of violent shudders rocked the vessel as it absorbed weapons fire. Through the viewport, Alina glimpsed resistant ships in pursuit, a motley collection of modified Dominion cruisers, Phylaxian hunter ships, and even several Earth vessels she recognized from the old defense fleet, somehow preserved and repurposed over the decades. The cell door disintegrated in a shower of crystalline fragments. Admiral Vexorn stood in the opening, his form now twisted into configurations Alina had never seen before, jagged edges protruding randomly, his usually orderly facets pulsing with chaotic, discordant lights. "What have you done?" he demanded, his voice causing the very air to vibrate painfully. "The Nexus has been corrupted. The Grand Sovereign is incapacitated." Alina leaned against the cell wall, applying pressure to her wound. "We restored it to its original purpose," she managed through gritted teeth. "Connection, not control. Understanding, not dominance." Vexorn's form shimmered with rage. "You primitive, limited creature, you've undone millennia of progress. The lesser species require direction, purpose. We require freedom," Alina countered. "Something your kind once understood, before the Dominion perverted your gifts." The ship lurched violently again. A subordinate officer materialized beside Vexorn, his crystalline form flickering with urgency. "Admiral, our engines are failing. The resistance vessels are closing in. Without the collective network, our targeting systems are operating at 17% efficiency." For the briefest moment, uncertainty flickered across Vexorn's facets, an emotion Alina had never witnessed in him before. Then his form hardened, edges becoming even more pronounced. "Plot course for the Cygnus Void," he commanded. "We have contingencies." The officer hesitated. "Sir, many of our crew are questioning orders. The Nexus recalibration has affected their conviction. Some are experiencing empathy. Purge them." Vexorn's voice cracked with fury. "Any unit exhibiting contamination is to be immediately disconnected and jettisoned." As the officer retreated, Vexorn turned back to Alina, extending a crystalline appendage that morphed into a complex scanning array. "You will tell me how to reverse the recalibration." Alina smiled despite the pain. "I can't. The process was designed by your ancestors to be irreversible, precisely to prevent what the Dominion became." Another violent impact rocked the ship. Warning lights bathed the cell in crimson. Vexorn withdrew abruptly. "This is not over, human," he promised, his voice colder than the void outside. "While I exist, the true Dominion survives." As the summit transitions into planning this unprecedented mission, Alina steps momentarily onto a private balcony overlooking Earth. The moon, now hosting a communications array that connects rather than controls, shines brightly above. She thinks of Admiral Vexorn, last seen fleeing into the void, his crystalline form twisted with hatred and incomprehension. "We're coming for you, Admiral," she whispers to the stars. "Not as you would expect, not with weapons drawn and vengeance in our hearts. And that's precisely why we'll win. Again." Elena's synthetic arm gleamed in Earth's reflected light as she traced the outline of her homeworld in the viewport. The prosthetic was superior to her lost limb in every technical aspect, yet she still felt phantom pains where Vexorn's crystalline blade had severed it during their final confrontation. The doors behind her whispered open. Krenzol's reconstructed form cast prismatic patterns across the polished floor of the balcony. "The delegates have reached consensus," he announced, his resonance frequencies calibrated to a gentle timbre that wouldn't aggravate her lingering neural damage. "The diplomatic mission is approved. 23 species will send representatives aboard the New Dawn." Elena nodded, her eyes still fixed on the stars. "And the military contingent?" "Minimal, as you requested," Krenzol confirmed, though several security advisors expressed colorful objections. A small smile touched her lips. "I imagine they did." Since the Resonance Liberation, the newly formed Galactic Concord had navigated a delicate balance between justice and reconciliation. Some worlds demanded retribution for centuries of Dominion oppression. Others, including Earth, advocated for a more measured approach. The ghosts of humanity's own bloody history had taught valuable lessons about cycles of vengeance. "There's something else," Krenzol said, his facets shifting to a deeper blue that Elena had learned indicated concern. Long-range sensors detected unusual crystalline formations in the Cygnus systems, patterns consistent with Vexorn's modified technology, but evolved. "He's adapting," Elena concluded, creating a new network outside the influence of the recalibrated nexus. The realization should have terrified her. 3 years ago, it would have. But Elena Rise was no longer the desperate resistance fighter gambling everything on one final mission. She had witnessed an empire fall, not through superior firepower, but through reconnection with fundamental truths. "The diplomatic shuttle departs at 600, Krenzol said. "Some advisors suggested you reconsider leading the mission personally. Your symbolic value to the Concord is considerable." Elena turned from the viewport, her expression resolute. "Symbols don't build peace, Krenzol. People do, sometimes one conversation at a time." She picked up a small crystalline shard from her desk, a fragment from the nexus that had embedded in her shoulder during the recalibration. It pulsed with a gentle light in response to her touch, resonating with a frequency that both Jean-Terry and humans could perceive. A physical reminder that connection between different species was not just possible, but natural. "Prepare the New Dawn," she said, slipping the shard into her pocket. "It's time Admiral Vexorn learned what humanity does after winning a war." End of story.